Hey everyone, I'm Mindy Kerr, the Worship and Creative Arts Pastor here at Grace. We want to welcome you this morning to Grace World Outreach Church. Our live stream will begin in just a few moments. But you know what? Today it's so easy for you to invite a friend to church. All you have to do is click the share button on this broadcast. So take just a moment and do that this morning. Also remember that giving online is super easy. All you have to do is go to graceworldag.org and click on that give button. You can also text to give by texting the amount you want to give to 84321. During this broadcast, our team will be available today to answer any questions that you have. We hope that you enjoy this service today, and make sure that you follow us on graceworldag.org to get updates from our pastor, to submit your prayer requests, and to stay in contact with our student ministries and our kids ministries here at Grace. And of course, always follow us on social media at GraceWorldAG. The service will begin in just a few minutes, and we're so glad to have you with us today.
Well, hello, Grace World, and welcome to our midweek service. I am thrilled to be able to come together. I want us to dive deeper into our sermon series. We're taking the entire letter of Colossians, and we started on Sunday in chapter 1 with the title of Jesus Is. And so I want us to dive deeper into that. In fact, today I'm joined with my wife and Chris and Annalisa Fulham, who are amazing youth pastors here at the church. We're going to have a great discussion. But before we jump into that, why don't we take a moment, let's reach up and invite the presence of the Lord to come into your home in this time right now.
is nothing like your love. My Jesus, there is nothing like your
Well, on Sunday, we started a whole brand new series here at the church on the book of Colossians in Risen in Me. And the title for Sunday was Jesus Is. And I asked the question, how do you fill in that blank? Who is Jesus to you? Where's that first thing that comes to mind? And the truth is, the most important thing about us is what we believe about Christ, because it sets the tone for our entire life. Now, in our grace groups this week, we're talking about this, and I wanted to take a moment today to be able to sit down with my wife, Chris and Annalisa Fulham, who are our youth pastors here at the church, do a phenomenal job. And so thank you guys for coming and sitting down and doing this. This is going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. And I want to say, just kind of kick things off.
Okay.
Jen and I were watching one of the videos that you guys put together. Now, you're doing content on a regular basis here at the church. I mean, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, there's always something from a sin that's kind of dropping. And the big one is Wednesday nights, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. So what's happening on Wednesdays?
Wednesdays, we are doing what's called Ascend Online, where we just kind of, we pre-record and we set out on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock in place of what would normally have been our service. Just something that God has placed on my heart just to share with our students in this time and this season, how they can apply it and get through this season.
Those
and
Wednesday nights have been awesome, haven't they?
Yes, they have been. Actually, Ray and I sit down and watch. She's kind of getting the best of both worlds because she's on that line of teen and kids still. So she's hanging out with the Grace kids doing stuff and then doing stuff with the Sin. So we're watching everything.
That's awesome.
And it's really, and then we have a conversation afterwards, which is really great. And so you guys are doing a really good job. Really great job.
So to all the parents that have teenagers, if you have not yet gotten them plugged in with Ascend, or maybe you're in the area and you're like, haven't got a place to get your student plugged in, I tell you don't have any other choice. It's right here with Chris and Annalisa Fulham. They're amazing. One of the things that you guys have done, and it's one of the fun videos, is that you guys sat down and were telling each other dad jokes and seeing who could get the other to crack up. So can we do that real fast? Just it would be fun.
We would love that.
I told Chris
I have a few.
to find like his best dad jokes. I like telling dad jokes, by the way.
You're a dad, so.
No, but I like telling dad jokes because sometimes I get him to laugh. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So here we go. Here's the goal: is you tell the dad joke, and you're trying to make me laugh, and then at the same time, I go back and forth, and we'll do a few of these and see what happens. And so you get to start first.
Is someone keeping score?
Yeah, Jenna, you can keep score.
You're going to keep
So
score?
go for it.
Okay. All right. What is the Lord's favorite kind of pizza?
I don't know.
Jesus!
They cracked up. Does that count?
Okay, fine.
All right.
Whatever.
Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself?
Didn't have a kickstand?
It was too tired. He's not even going to crack. All right, your turn.
Why can't you hear a pterodactyl go to the bathroom?
I don't know. Why can't I hear a pterodactyl go to the bathroom?
Because the P is silent.
I don't know if I got that one yet.
Do you know how to pterodactyl is spelled with a P?
It's spelled with a P at the beginning.
Oh, so I didn't know that. I would have started it with a T.
Yes.
All right, so here you go.
Okay, one for Chris.
All right. So what's ET short for?
Because he's got little legs.
He already knew that one.
Oh, man.
He's got tiny legs.
You can't ruin the jokes for
Sorry,
us.
I'm sorry. I'm
All right.
sorry. Do
Your
over.
turn.
You
No,
get
you
another
go,
one.
go.
You have backups. Go.
I do have backups.
Okay.
So let's do this one. And this is appropriate. So spring is here. Spring is here. And
I'm rolling my eyes.
You're rolling your eyes. Spring is here. I got so excited. I wet my plants.
I'm sorry.
That one cracks.
Funny.
That one cracks.
Really funny. That was a good one. That's a good
All right, go.
Okay.
This will be the last one.
This is the last one?
Yeah, we'll make this in the last one.
Oh, man. Oh, I still have a few good ones. All right. Which one? Okay. What is a foodie's favorite weather pattern?
I have no clue.
A McFlurry. See, I told you.
That was a good one.
All right. Just remember what I told you.
Yes.
All right. One of my favorite memories as a kid was when my brothers put me inside of a tire and rolled me down a hill. They were good years.
Yes. Yes.
Through and through. Through and through.
All the way. Dad joke right there.
Totally dad jokes. All right. For those of you that were laughing hysterically with us, you're welcome for that. Those that were offended by that, I am sorry. But we've all been locked up, cooped up in quarantine. I think
Stir
it's
crazy.
good to have a laugh, so just ease up
Good
for a
medicine.
moment.
Yes.
Laughter is good
Yes.
medicine.
Yep.
The book of Colossians is a tremendous letter of Paul's. In fact, many theologians call this the most important letter that Paul wrote. Some consider it to be an anchor book within the Bible. And the reason is because Paul puts Christ preeminent in all things. In fact, Colossians makes no direct reference even to an Old Testament passage. Everything is completely centered on the person of Jesus. And that's what I love. Our message here is simply Jesus. And you can't improve upon that. This is what it says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. It says, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He's the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that everything in him might be preeminent. For in him the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. That one blows my mind. We're going to talk more about that on Sunday. Through him to reconcile himself to all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. What a powerful statement of who Christ is, just in those few short verses, 13 direct references to who Christ is. And I wanted real quickly just kind of to jump in kind of into a little bit of dialogue here. I mentioned this is one of Paul's most important letters, and he writes this from prison, which is a reminder to us that are living in confinement even right now, that even though we may feel constrained or confined, God is not.
That's right.
He is unleashed. In fact, I'm even seeing right now that the gospel is breaking out.
Yep.
Amen.
How are you guys seeing, especially like in our student ministries in Ascend, how are you watching in this present season of confinement, watching the gospel just break out?
Well, several ways, honestly. We're in constant contact with our leaders, with our students. And so there's been several stories that we've heard of our leaders just as they're keeping in touch with our students and just seeing how they're doing. They're talking about how they're able to share the gospel with their families and how they're just spending time with the Lord themselves. I've heard several students on different occasions just say that because everything has been removed, they're not able to go to school. They're stuck at home. We're in isolation, and they've said that since they started just making that discipline of, you know what, in this time, in this season, I'm going to spend a standard time with the Lord. And they've said that since they've started that, they have begun to realize like it's something that they look forward to every day. That some of them have been like, I started just 5-10 minutes and I'm realizing it's going 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I get excited about going to spend that time with the Lord. And we've had several students start their own small groups over Zoom calls. And we have, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. We have two young girls who started a a group, and they've basically been growing. We have one that's like over 20 girls that meet in this group, and she leads it, and it's incredible to see that. And then she's in turn asking questions and just really diving in some really deep questions. It's really incredible to see the hunger that's happening right now in this season, that the students are hungry. The questions that they're asking, they're going deeper. You could tell it's not just surfacey like stuff, but it's deep stuff that it's really encouraging to see God do.
It's great to know that even in this present season, that the church, even though we haven't all been able to come together, that hasn't stopped the church from being able to reach out and to make a difference. That's
Absolutely.
awesome to hear.
It is.
How do kids get involved inside of these groups?
Absolutely. They can reach out to us individually. They can reach out to our Facebook page or connect with us there. They could also just go to our Instagram pages, ascend_SM, and they could connect with all the information. We also you can call the church office, and we can give you that information as well.
That is awesome.
Well, one of the things I love about this through both our kids and students and just in general is the fact that there's room now. Not that there's not always been room, but there's real room now for gifts and talents to begin to rise, and they can see the need for who they are, for their purpose that God has called them to be, to step up and say, hey, I can do something, and realize that they can do something now and not have to be an adult. They don't have to be a certain age or a certain degree or whatever, but right now they can do something, and you're seeing them own it and put a lot of purpose to it, and it's really effective because they themselves are influencers. So the ability then to share the gospel is just fantastic.
One thing that I have seen even in this season has been that some of the areas that the church at large has been somewhat either deficient or weak in, you're now watching God begin to like bring those things to the surface. And one of those is beginning to empower leaders, not just full-time paid staff leaders at a church, but genuine leaders. And so you see that even these girls that are stepping forward and taking the gospel out and beginning to reach people, I guarantee that whenever you roll the tape back and you look back, you'll see more students having been reached during this time than maybe what was taking place before when we were just caught in our regular patterns, And so, that's awesome to think about the fact that even though we may feel like, okay, I'm confined, I'm constrained, I feel like some things have been taken away, the truth is God has been completely, he's never been hinged. He's never been restricted. And we're seeing that even now break out. The big point on Sunday that I asked a question is that Jesus is, and then asked, what do you put in that blank? The most important thing about you is what you think about Christ, because it sets the course for your entire life. If you see him as, not real, then you'll live your life as though I don't have to hold myself account to him. If you see him as being, the old adage that I hated seeing, it's like, Jesus is my homeboy. This idea that Jesus is like my best friend and my buddy, and I can just kick it with him, which there's a reality of truth to being able to genuinely know him. But what it did is it brought him down to our level instead of realizing that, no, he brings us up to his and he elevates things. So how do you guys, what would you put, like the moment I say Jesus is, what's the first word that drops in your mind, Annalisa?
For me, it's peace. I grew up in a home where, my parents loved Jesus and they did the best they could, but there was a lot of chaos and there was a lot of friction in the home. And later in my life, I struggled with fear and a lot of insecurity, and Jesus just has been peace. It's like I remember moments in my life where the house was chaotic and there was fighting and things were happening, and I remember just saying Jesus, and his peace would overwhelm me, and I would ask for his peace, and I'd fall asleep. And later in my life, I remember thinking, like, Lord, why you're not real? You know, every time I ask for you to come, like, and reach out to me and bring peace to my heart, I would just fall asleep, and that would be the end of that. And I just remembered his voice so clear that night when he said, I am real. I allowed you to sleep in the midst of the chaos. I'm your peace, and I'm going to deliver you, and I'm going to be there with you. And so peace, he's my peace in everything in my world, and even in the middle of everything happening right now, he's peace to me.
Yeah. That's a good reminder, right?
That's really good.
That's a good reminder.
That's really good.
Peace in the midst of the storm, peace in the midst of the chaos.
Yeah.
Many of us need to be reminded of that, even right now. Chris, what do you put in there? Jesus is.
Honestly, not to sound cheesy, but he's everything. He is peace. He's strength. He's provision, and I've seen him in every circumstance pull through in every case. I've seen him be everything in my life.
Yeah.
When I needed him to be strength, he was my strength. When I needed peace, he was ministering peace to me. He allowed me to rest and have comfort. When we needed provision, when there were times we didn't know how we were going to pay bills, but we knew that we were going to give our tithes and we were going to be obedient to the Word of God, that there were times where we didn't understand how we were going to have groceries, how the lights were going to stay on, and every single time. So he's everything. He is everything.
That's the central message of Colossians, is that Christ is all.
Yeah.
He's all sufficient, everything in him. We make a mistake and we try to add or take away. He is everything. Babe, how do you put how do you finish up that sentence? Jesus is. And I loved asking it on Sunday because people were populating the Facebook comment feed immediately with just, he's awesome, he's incredible, he's peace, and he's supernatural, he's everything.
The first thing that comes to my mind is sovereign. Because I can trust him in everything. It doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter what the world is going on around. It doesn't even matter the circumstances in my own life or around me. He's sovereign, and I can trust him. That we've gone through hard times in our life. I lost my dad almost 8 years ago, and he's sovereign. I trust him. I have no reason but to trust him because he's always been good. He's always been faithful. He's never failed, and I know that he never will.
Yeah. He's over all things, which is comforting even to remember even during these times, that the president is not over this crisis. Our governor is not over this crisis. They're trying to manage it. They're trying to figure it out. But our God is sovereign over all things, and he's bigger than every bit of this. He does have a plan. And it's great to be able to remember that. I shared out of that passage 10 things that Paul brings out that Christ is. 2 of those was that Jesus is the Alpha and he is the Omega. He's the beginning and he's the end. That all things have to begin in him and all things find completion in him. If it doesn't start in him, and I think even in my own life, how many times I've been guilty of starting things without starting it in him, not praying about it, not asking him, just thinking it's a good idea and running with it. And then you get halfway through it and realize, okay, this was a mistake and it's all falling apart. And then we're praying for him to bail us out in the process. But realizing that all things begin, that you and I begin in him. Everything starts in him and everything finishes in him, and it finds its completion in him. And I used the example on Sunday of a bridge, that you've got a beginning and an end to a bridge, and those set the anchor points. That those things are essential. If I remove one, the bridge collapses and falls apart. So not only does it give a beginning and an end, but it in itself is actually held together and supported by that structure. There is a modern thought that is beginning to kind of grow up in this generation. And the name of it, is modern deism. It's this idea that God, if there is a God, that he created things, he started things, but now he's removed himself from the equation. Everything's just kind of like working itself out. It's really a picture of a fatherless generation, this idea that the father came in, he fathered a child, and now he's out of the picture. He doesn't really care so much about what takes place, and you can kind of get an idea where even that thought process comes from, because you have an entire generation that dad has not been around or hasn't been a great dad, and so that they've just taken that and they've inflected it upon on God. But here's the deal: Colossians tells us that all things are held together in Christ. He not only is the beginning and the end, he holds all things together. How have you seen him hold things together in your life? What has that meant for you to know that he's literally been the one that's binding it together and holding it together?
Yeah.
I guess that one's for me.
There's so many. There's so many stories. I mean, I know so many of us have incredible testimonies of how God has held us together. For us, one of our most critical moments was Chris's dad passing, and if you want to share that for a moment.
There was it's 7 years ago now, right around there, and so I remember it was Wednesday afternoon, and I was at the church that we were at in Texas, and go Texas, and I was preparing for youth service, and we were worship leaders at the time. And I got the call from my sister. Long story short, my father ended up taking his life. And it was the most difficult time of my life.
Right.
It's it was the worst news I had ever heard. The worst toll that any news had ever taken on me. And in that moment, all I could do was collapse.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting there for a while. No one was around, and I had to make my way back to the church office to talk to someone, let them know what had happened. And I just remember Annalisa was actually away on a business trip. She was at a conference for real estate, and she came back right around the time I was finally getting home, and I had to tell her, and we both felt honestly weak in that moment, but at the same time held together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That he was our strength. He was everything in that moment. He was everything that we needed. And even in what felt like weakness and brokenness and hurt and everything that was detrimental, that could be detrimental, I remember going home or coming home, which was actually here, and all of my sisters converged on Spring Hill, Brooksville to celebrate my dad and to handle all of the things that we needed to handle. And for the first time ever, I'm the youngest of 5, and all of my sisters.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
For the first time ever, all of my sisters asking me to step up, asking me, why would this happen? Why would God allow this to happen?
Yeah.
And then in the middle of everything in the funeral home, when it's just me and my sisters and my brother-in-laws and Annalisa, and they ask, will you pray for all of us?
Yeah.
Will you pray for peace
Yeah.
in this moment? Because they understood even in that the legacy of my dad, who was a man of God, that he was always in the Word of God. He lived the best that he could to be just like Christ. They saw that, and they wanted that in that moment.
Yeah.
It was an amazing testimony of how God held us together in that moment, and even the moments to come, and how he walked us through that. He gave us so much strength. It was a difficult season, but honestly, the weeping and the sadness that we have today is not necessarily sadness, but just the hope that he gave us through that season, because it honestly reminds us of such incredible moments of seeing God pull through in so many ways. I mean, people blessed us to be able to come here to the funeral. I mean, there was just a lot of things that had taken place that God just started to work out his perfect plan, and he held us together through that season, made us stronger in our marriage, and even just in our relationships. And his sisters, I mean, they don't go months without talking. They just talk constantly, and that wasn't the case before.
What a powerful reminder that He's with us through all those storms.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's every single one of us are going to face storms in our life. We all collectively are going through a
Absolutely.
storm right now. You know, there's nothing in the Word of God that tells you that you're not going to face storms. In fact, you're going to find many trials and tribulations and tests throughout life. These seasons are going to come. In this life, you are going to have many troubles. You know, even when the disciples are in the midst of the storm, Jesus had sent them into it. You know, he just fed the 5,000. He tells them to get in the boat and go to the other side. He actually sent them into the storm. He didn't send the storm. He sent them into it, which is something for us to, you know, people are wondering, it's like, you know, God, why would you allow this to come? Well, more or less, think of it this way. He's actually sent us into it. Why? Because coming through the storm is going to be of benefit on the other side.
Absolutely.
You're going to be strengthened on the other side. Every storm has a beginning and it has an end. You're going to come through that. It's just in the same way that in that storm you've now come through the other side. You're stronger. Same thing's true for those that are walking through this one as well. You're going to come through this. If you've lost a job, you know, if your hours have been reduced, if income has been lost, you're going to come through to the other side and you're going to make it. You're going to make it. Let me finish up right here, and I think that's such a powerful point. So you've watched how God has just brought you through and held things together. One of the last points that I shared on Sunday is that Jesus is the way, that there's no other way. There's no other way to God. He is the way. He's the way that we walk throughout life. He's the way that we're sustained. How did you find that? How did you find Him to be not just a good story or a good man, but I literally found Him to be life in all its fullness. I found Him to be the way. What was that story like for you?
For me, having grown up in church, I've kind of rode the coattails of mom and dad for a long time. So just they were very involved in church, and just kind of being here, I took advantage of that for the longest time. I knew exactly what to say, how to say, when to raise my hands, when to pray, what to say, how to pray, all these different things. And it was just almost like learned behavior is really what it was. And I remember just after graduating high school and things, I ended up in a relationship for a little while, and just I needed to get away from here. And one of my sisters, her and her husband were youth pastors in South Carolina. And they realized that I wasn't doing the greatest, and that I was just stalled. And that if I'd stayed in the position I was in, that was as far as I was going to go. And so my sister just said, hey, why don't you come to South Carolina for a little while? Live with us, get a job, and we'll see what happens. I ended up going. I was there for about 8 months, and just in that time, it's almost like similar to what is now, because all I did was stay in their apartment, go to church, and go to work.
Right.
So I found myself in a place of isolation, and it's almost like something I spoke recently on one of our Ascend Onlines was that David out in the field was a place of isolation, and that's where God worked a lot of things out of him, but also worked a lot of things into him. And I think South Carolina was like my time in the fields, and God really worked some things out of me, and it became my faith.
I'm convinced that a lot of what even is happening right here, right now, is Him removing all the obstacles, all the things out of the way. I mean, in a moment, all of our schedules have cleared up. In a moment, everything that was in the way has completely been removed. And there's this incredible moment to discover Him, the way back to the Father, the way to that place of letting Him be sovereign and preeminent right there in the midst of everything. To where then He takes the central place in our life and in our homes and in our families. And I pray that you do not miss the power in that moment. You know, the reason why we're jumping into Colossians is it's such a great reminder to a church, such a great reminder to us that He has to be central to all things and completely there. I have enjoyed this. I wish we had more time, but I want you to do me a favor. I want you to pray for the church.
Okay.
want you to look right into that camera right there. And I want you to pray for Grace World. Pray for those that are watching. There's people probably watching this from all around the world that have identified even with your story. But pray for them right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, God, I thank you for each and every person who's watching. God, and I know that in this time, in this season, there's uncertainty, there's unsurety. And God, I pray, God, just like how Pastor Daniel asked, fill in the blank, Jesus is. God, and you are everything. You are strength, your provision, you are grace, your mercy. You are everything we need when we need it, how we need it. So, Father, I pray that in this moment, that whatever people are needing, whatever you may be needing as you're watching, if you need strength, if you need peace, whatever you need, he is that. And I pray that God would be that in your life, that you would find time. We have the utmost of time, that you would find the time to be alone with him, get alone with him. God, I pray that you would minister to people, that you would just invade their lives, invade their houses. God, that they would realize it is you and you alone that they need. God, I thank you for the things, the stories that we've heard of how people are being drawn ever closer to you, that you are showing up in marriages, healing marriages and homes and families, that you are healing sickness and disease. You are showing up in unparalleled circumstances, in finances, in so many different ways. God, none of it makes sense at times. The only thing that it can point back to is you. And God, we thank you for what you are doing, what you are working in us and through us and out of us. God, and I pray that you would do that for each and every person who's watching. And it's in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Grace World, remember that Sunday, we're all getting together online at 10 a.m. We're going to jump into part 2 of this series in Colossians, Risen in Me. This past Sunday, we talked about Jesus is. This upcoming Sunday, we're going to talk about in him I am. We're going to talk about what he's done that enables you and I to be able to live and follow inside of that. So that happens at 10. There is content happening from the church all week long, something for your kids, something for your students, something for you. All of that's available on our website for you to see. In fact, there's a guide that you can look at graceworldag.org. If you're not plugged into one of our groups, we really need you to be plugged into a group. We want in the season where we're told to be distant, we don't want you to be disconnected. The church is the assembled. And if we're not coming together in relationship, then we're not being the church. You cannot do church in isolation. You cannot do it alone. You have to do it with the body. It's the way that you weather through the storm. We weather it in him and in the church. And so we want to make sure that you're connected all the way through this entire season. And you know what? There's light at the end of the tunnel. This ball got all wound up really fast. It's like everything kind of came into chaos. Well, now it's time to start kind of unraveling that. And we're going to get back to being together very soon. But even in this pause, I don't want you to miss the moment of what he's doing in your life. In fact, I also want to say, I feel like there's really somebody who's watching this right now that this season has caused you to confront yourself and you haven't liked what you've seen. There's a lot of things around you that either feel like they're falling apart in your life, or there are things that you've taken notice of and you're like, you know what, I need help. My friend, don't let the isolation cause you to continue to get distant. Reach out to us, send us a message on Facebook, call the church. We're here for you. We don't want you to be destroyed in this season, but to come to the other side and be better and stronger. Grace World, we love you. Thank you for continuing to give. Thank you for continuing to be a part. Thank you for continuing to engage. You are showing Jesus to this community. You're helping others discover life in all of its fullness. We love you. We are here for you. If you need us, reach out. God bless you.